Well, I rather take the view that, the moves, certainly the very recent ones, have been fairly small. 2 or 3 basis points doesn't seem very much to me. On the other hand, if we look at the bigger picture, interest rates are high both at the short term and the long term relative to economic growth, and that does create a problem in managing the national debt. And it's much more of a problem than it would have been, say, 20 years ago, because the debt is larger relative to national income, first as a result of the financial crisis, and secondly as a result of the COVID epidemic.
What does that mean then for what the Chancellor needs to do now? If you see these moves as being more in the orderly line, does she not need to take action, or does this mean we're more likely to have more dramatic steps?
Well, I think we now have to move on to the issue of the fiscal rules. Now, fiscal rules are arbitrary, and Britain has had a remarkable number of fiscal rules. But I must say, I think one thing that would frighten markets would be for the Chancellor to do what so many Conservative Chancellors did and change the fiscal rules again, just so that she can meet them. So if that's an option that you have to rule out, and I think it probably does have to be ruled out, a change to the fiscal rules might be one thing that could trigger a Liz Truss episode and tears tomorrow morning. So that leaves either tax increases or spending cuts if the fiscal rule gets close to being broken, and everyone's expectation is that it will get close to being broken. On the other hand, it's the OBR that will produce a forecast, and that's coming in March.
Well, indeed, Reeves indicated to us that she would choose spending cuts over tax rises if the headroom evaporated and she had to make that choice. But is there enough in efficiency savings that she could calm the market, do you think? Would it really actually need to be austerity?
Well, chancellors always, or incoming chancellors in particular, always like the idea of efficiency savings. That's the gramophone record that keeps being used. And I think the truth is no one's terribly clear where there are efficiency savings and where there aren't. Productivity in the National Health Service, for example, has fallen since the epidemic. And understanding why that's happened is important. It may point the way to increasing productivity again, but you can't say that there's just a clear list of efficiency savings, cuts to public spending that can be made that no one will notice. I mean, reading or hearing about the dreadful news from California over the last few days, one wonders how far the people of Los Angeles were keen to limit public spending, and maybe, at least on fire prevention, one would think they should have spent a bit more.
Well, yeah, there's that political expectation of public services, but there's also the economic impact. If there's austerity, does that just trap the UK in a doom loop in terms of growth?
Well, I think in terms of growth, the issue is that we don't actually have a terribly good understanding of what drives productivity growth. In the short term, of course, there's been an element of concern because we've seen weaker growth figures, but what really matters in terms of the viability of the national debt is longer term growth, and there we have the problem, of course, that since the crisis, productivity growth has been much weaker than it used to be. Is there the risk of a doom loop? Well, there is a problem, and as I say, that problem is the size of the national debt and the interest rate bill that goes with it, and there's not an easy way round that.
Is the UK's debt unsustainable at this point?
No, I don't think it's unsustainable, but it does create problems. It does impose a tax bill.
At what point do you see that becoming a possibility? I mean, if we're talking about yields at 4.84% and to your point of the cost that weighs on the public finances, is there what's the scary level?
Well, I don't think there's any particular scary level. What matters is both, of course, the interest rate and the size of the debt. The interest rate is perhaps likely to change more quickly, but with debt approximately equal to GDP, you can see that a 1 percentage point increase in the interest rate, and we have to remember that a lot of the UK debt is financed at a short-term interest rate. Now, a 1% increase in the interest rate creates a 1% point increase in the tax bill. Of course, the government gets some of that back from the tax on interest payments on the national debt, but it's still a very material amount. Can more be collected in taxation? Yes, it obviously can, but the problem there that the Chancellor has is the promise she made that no, she was only putting up taxes once, and that the more general issue that the Labour government agreed not to, or said they wouldn't increase of any of the main revenue-raising taxes.